What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Sloppy Saturdays. And today we are going over an episode that I kind of don't even know how to word. So basically, before I get into this episode, I'm going to give you the backstory on why I came out with this episode. So I was going live a lot in the offseason, going over my top 10 quarterbacks in college football. Now, if you guys were in those lives, you got a preview of it. I haven't released my top 10 quarterbacks of college football as a complete episode. But when I was going over my top 10 quarterbacks, a lot of people were asking questions about quarterbacks that I am very high on that I didn't put on that list. Now, I do think there is a way where a quarterback is not on a college football playoff caliber team that could be a top 10 quarterback in the country. But for me, I was splitting hairs, and everybody in my top 10 quarterback list has a realistic pathway with their team to a Heisman Trophy type route and a realistic pathway to the college football playoffs with their teams. This list right here is basically a list of quarterbacks that I believe are top 10 talents in college football, 5 that I believe really have an elite skill set in college football, but may not be on the program that gives them as great of a path to win the Heisman, as great of a path to make the college football playoffs with the situations they are in. Now, largely what I'm going to be talking about in this episode with these quarterbacks is how great their skill sets are, and then also what I believe they should do for their career and how this year is going to pan out for them. So let's get right into it. Now, these are 5 quarterbacks, like I said, that I believe have elite skill sets in college football. And I believe that if they were on teams that really had a chance to do damage in the college football playoffs, they could be better than quarterbacks that are on college football playoff teams that I have in my top 10. Now, at number 5, I'm going to explain why he comes in at number 5. But I believe this guy is the most talented quarterback on my list. Possibly the most talented quarterback in the entire country. Now, we have Malik Washington. Malik Washington at Maryland last year, I believe, was just trying to keep his head above water. Maryland, roster-wise, one of the worst teams in the entirety of the Big Ten. But this quarterback is so talented. When we look at Malik Washington, we're looking at a 6'5", possibly 6'6" quarterback, 230, that could really run the football, had over 300 yards last year on 56 carries, and then passing the football, 2,900 yards, 17 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. But the eye-glaring thing to me is 57% completion percentage. Now, when we look at Malik Washington and what he should have done this year, now you guys are looking at, like, again, true freshman quarterback, ultra talented, probably has the best arm in college football, most arm strength. The ball absolutely flies out of his arm effortlessly. And like I said, with his legs, an elusive runner at 6'5", super hard to bring down. But I actually like the move of him staying at Maryland. Now, you guys might be saying, why do you like the move of him staying at Maryland? One of the worst Power 4 programs in the country. I believe Maryland really allows him to focus on getting better as a player. I believe this whole year is how can we up the stats? How can we make more smart throws? How can we up this completion percentage? And again, like we always say, completion percentage doesn't directly show how accurate you are as a passer. And like I said, in the Big Ten, where he's basically almost an underdog in every in-conference game, it is tough for him to keep his head in the water. But I also think when you look at Malik Washington, if he would have transferred this year, I'm not 100% sure that he could have gone to a top contender this year. Like, at 57% completion percentage, I think, again, when you're looking at Miami, LSU, a lot of these teams that are taking transfer portal quarterbacks that really want to take their quarterbacks to the national championship, I don't think Malik Washington is ready to do that. So I think, again, this year for Malik Washington, it's all about getting smarter as a passer, making all the right decisions that you can, even though, again, the program is not really helping him out much. Next year, say you come back and you go maybe 17-9 touchdown as you had last year with a 57% completion percentage, maybe those numbers change a lot. Maybe you go 23-8, which isn't crazy, at Maryland, touchdown interception ratio. And let's not get completely unrealistic. Like I said, Maryland is going to be a horrible program. But maybe that 57% completion percentage gets to possibly 63% completion percentage. Now you get in a scenario where even though Maryland is one of the worst programs in the country, and those stats like 23-8, 63% completion percentage isn't eye popping. But you look at the talent, like this was a guy at Manning Passing Academy. Like everybody knows the talent Malik Washington has. So now when you have at Miami or at LSU trying to get transfer portal quarterbacks next year, teams that always flip their quarterbacks, you look at 23-8 with 63%, and now you say, hey, if we put this ultra-talented quarterback in our system, we could elevate those numbers even better, and this guy could be a first-round NFL talent quarterback. So again, I don't think Malik Washington numbers at Maryland as a true freshman were there as an underclassman to make the right move of him transferring to the portal, but I believe, like I said, a guy with the best arm in the country, 6'5", that could really run the football, could be the most talented quarterback in the country. He just has to focus on getting better as a quarterback in a program that doesn't have the expectations. And then next year, he could really go to a Miami, a LSU. Like, everybody's going to be in a Malik Washington next year, and I 100% think he transfers. At number 4, we have Jaron Sagapotele. Now, Jaron Sagapotele, little different as a true freshman than Malik Washington. I believe his numbers were a lot better at Cal. Now, you guys may say in the ACC, he definitely had more opportunity, and his team wasn't as bad as Maryland in the Big Ten. 100% agree with that. But Jaron Sagapotele, to me, he's a guy that even when he's down, like, he looks to ball. He keeps on throwing. He's a guy that threw for 3,400 yards last year, 18 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Now, on this list, definitely not a dual-threat quarterback compared to everybody else on the list. But I do think he's a guy that could at least take what a defense gives him running the football. What I absolutely love about Jaron Sagapotele going into this year, like I said, the conference just provides so much opportunity. But I still think as a true freshman, and what we've been seeing from true freshman quarterbacks in the last 3 years haven't succeeded, going to Cal and being 7-6 was very impressive, making that team a winning team. But I also think what Cal done around Jaron Sagapotele is phenomenal. Like, you're bringing Ian Strong, a 6'4" receiver, opposite of KJ Duff last year at Rutgers, who had 700 yards last year, 5+ touchdowns, and like I said, a guy that can play outside on the X. I think that definitely makes your receiving core better. Then you bring Chase Hendricks out of Ohio, who had over 1,000 yards, comes in as a senior with experience, diversifies this receiving core as a route runner. I think that upgrades your receiving core a lot. And what I love the most, the transfer portal addition I love the most for this offense is Adam Muhammad. I think Adam Muhammad is super underrated. He's a guy that was buried behind the depth chart last year at Washington behind Jonah Coleman, but he got runway towards the end when I think Washington thought they were going to retain him, but they didn't. He had over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns against Oregon, had over 100 yards against UCLA. Like, he's a guy with over 500 rushing yards, 150 receiving yards last year. Like, he had significant production behind one of the best running backs in the country. So I think those 3 guys added to this offense. I think this is a situation where Jaron Sagapotele at Cal can make this ACC team a top 5 team in that conference, make this team possibly an 8-5 team. You see, I don't know, it depends if they play a bowl game. Again, maybe a 9-4 team. Like, I think this team is very talented. I think Jaron Sagapotele is one of the best players in the conference. And like I said, I feel like he's a guy that's a super accurate passer. Like I said, in one of the worst situations he could have been in, 64% completion percentage as a true freshman, can make every single throw. And like I said, Cal is running this program like an NFL program. They got underrated transfer portal ads and really are trying to go all in on retaining Jaron Sagapotele long term. Now, again, I really like how Cal's ran, like I said. I think management-wise, super underrated. He could stay at Cal his whole career because I think, again, his statistics are going to take a level up this year and possibly even next year. They could just keep going all in around him in this conference. Has a ton of opportunity. But you could also see a situation definitely for Jaron Sagapotele. Like, you could have seen it this year where he transferred out, but I do think it's the right move, at least staying another year there. Very similar to the situation I was saying to Malik Washington. You could definitely see next year as well him transfer to a top program and then go in the NFL draft. But I absolutely love the situation for Jaron Sagapotele. Like I said, when you look at Ian Strong, Chase Hendricks, and Adam Muhammad, this offense is going to be a lot better around him, and I expect him to have a huge year in the ACC. Now, somebody I feel a little bit differently about, again, one of the most talented quarterbacks in the country without a doubt, and very different from Malik Washington. When you look at CJ Bailey at NC State over the last couple of years, his first year as a true freshman, 64% completion percentage, 17 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Believe that's much better. He also has 279 yards on the ground. Then we see last year, I thought one of the most underrated seasons in the country. Like, we're looking at a guy, like I said, that's 6'6", could make every single throw on the field, and a legit runner. Last year, he had a 68% completion percentage, 3,100 yards, a beautiful touchdown to interception ratio at 25-9, and then he also had 215 yards on the ground with 6 touchdowns. Now, my biggest issue with CJ Bailey is I believe the time that he should have transferred was this year. Now, I think, again, when you look at the new age of college football, you always got to commend loyalty. But at the same time, CJ Bailey is a guy that could have gone out of the NFL draft at the end of this year, which he still can. But I do think now with him staying at NC State, it is going to be next year. One, due to how loaded this quarterback class is. But also at the same time, like, you stay, I think you want to go into college football next year to a college football playoff contender. But again, we just talked about Jaron Sagapotele at Cal, how his situation got a lot better with what's around him. I feel the complete opposite about CJ Bailey, and I think that's why he should have transferred this year. I think his situation got a lot worse. Like, you lose Hollywood Smothers, that's going to be one of the best running backs in the country this year, to Texas, one of the best programs in the country. You lose Nick Rogers. Now, he is injured. I don't know if he's even going to play this season for Alabama, but he transferred to Alabama at the end of this year. And you also lose, why am I drawing a blank? You lose Tremont Williams to USC as well. So your top 3 weapons, you lose. And again, you had this team at 8-5 in the ACC. You had great numbers, nearly 70% completion percentage at NC State, 25-9, 3,100 yards. But I believe this was the point where you had to transfer to a top program. And I believe everybody would have been in on you. Like I said, 6'6" quarterback, but different than Malik Washington, where your numbers were there. This was the time where you could possibly put your hat in the ring to a Miami, to an LSU, to a Texas Tech. Now my issue with CJ Bailey is, again, ultra talented, but are your numbers going to be the same or better when you lose all your weapons? Now, I think JoJo Trader was a phenomenal ad because I think it's a guy that couldn't get on the field at Miami last year, a team that went to the national championship. But also, you look at JoJo Trader and TJ Bailey, these were 2 guys that played in high school together, so it brings in continuity. But everything else, I'm just not sold on. I do think Duke Scott could possibly be a good running back. If you look at 500 yards last year behind Hollywood Smothers. But I think your offense was a lot better last year. And you put in 2 years at NC State where, again, what everybody does after that is put their hat in the ring to a bigger program. I do think, again, TJ Bailey could definitely go to like a Miami, LSU, one of these top fishes at the end of this year. But I'm just worried that your numbers are going to take a dip with what you have around you this year. Everybody else around you went to bigger programs. I thought that was the route for you, CJ Bailey. But one of the most talented quarterbacks in the country for sure. At number 2, a guy that I think everybody is just extremely low on, and I don't think it honestly makes sense to me, is Nico Iamaleava. Now, when you look at Nico Iamaleava at UCLA, a situation that he brought upon himself without a doubt. Like, you look at one of the worst situations that you could possibly do. He wanted more money from Tennessee. Tennessee said, we are good. Now, I do think Tennessee would be a lot better with Nico Iamaleava, 100%. But they just didn't want to pay him. They didn't like the morals. Nico Iamaleava was a guy that also came out against the game, college football playoff game against Ohio State, that he's like didn't want to play in that game unless he got a certain dollar amount. So I understand why Tennessee definitely went off of him. But he thought he was going to get more money from them. He didn't. He thought he was going to get the same amount of money from as great of a program. He didn't. He goes to UCLA. They were an absolute dumpster fire last year. But I believe they did the right move when you go get Bob Chesney, fire your coach. I'm super high on Bob Chesney. What also did it as well, which they had to do, is go all in on the transfer portal. But they go all in on the transfer portal with upperclassmen. Like you bring in a Leland Smith, a Landon Ellis on his receiving core, receivers from smaller programs that are seniors. Also, this offensive line, you completely revamp it. This offensive line was horrible, and we knew it right away against Utah. They were getting dominated in the trenches. Nico Iamaleava had no shot. You bring in 4 upperclassmen offensive linemen, along with Wade Knight out of JMU, the running back who had 1,400 yards last year. I absolutely love the situation for Nico Iamaleava. Now, don't get me wrong. Nico Iamaleava and UCLA, they aren't going to be a college playoff team in the Big Ten. But again, this could be a team with Nico Iamaleava that goes 8-5, 9-4. And when we look at Nico Iamaleava, a 6'6" quarterback that runs like a gazelle and could absolutely throw over the field, I think Nico Iamaleava is extremely underrated. When we look at his first year at Tennessee, threw for 63% completion percentage, 26 touchdowns, 2,600 yards, 19 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. Like, as a first-time starter, leading your team to the college football playoffs in the SEC, again, when we look at a lot of first-time starters, that doesn't necessarily happen. Now, I think for Nico Iamaleava, a guy that's as talented as he is, a guy that you could argue is the most talented quarterback in the country, I think he's going to burn somebody at some point. Like, 100%. Talent wins out. I talk about it time and time again. Whether you want to talk about players in the course of history, whether it's Russell Wilson, Tom Brady, quarterbacks just absolutely falling, Dak Prescott, there's a certain point where you could keep going through these horrible situations, but at a certain point, if you have that talent, it's going to ultimately win out. And that's the case with Nico Iamaleava to me. Now, can he revamp his stock entirely? Because I believe if he would have stayed at Tennessee, he would be looked at as a first-round NFL talent right now. And again, in a loaded quarterback class where we could see 5 guys possibly go in the first round, I don't know if that's necessarily going to be Nico Iamaleava. And then the problem is, like I said, with everything Nico Iamaleava did in his past, when you're going into this loaded quarterback class next year, are they going to say, hey, I'm splitting hairs between Nico Iamaleava and a Darian Mensah? Or I'm splitting hairs between Nico Iamaleava and a CJ Carr, Julian Sayin, Trinidad Chambers, whoever it may be, you may lean with that other guy because as a leader, the stuff that Nico Iamaleava did in the past and the people he had in his ear may hurt him in that sense. But again, like I said, a 6'6" quarterback, and then even at UCLA, that was a 3-9 program last year. Like, he had signs of, like, this guy's different. Like, with the throws he could make and the what he could do with his legs. And you look at Penn State last year, the biggest upset in the country, a 20-point underdog. He rushes for 128 yards. He throws 17 for 24 and puts in 5 touchdowns. Like, you saw even on his 3-9 program that was a disaster last year, that Nico Iamaleava is that guy. And like I said, with everything they did in the transfer portal, they kind of looked like almost like an LSU. Again, not saying they brought in that type of talent, but just the amount of newcomers, which they needed to have. But I love Bob Chesney, like I said. This is a situation where Nico Iamaleava in the Big Ten could be a winning team, and he could show people now that I should be taken into consideration in the first 2 rounds of NFL draft. I absolutely love it. But I also think an underrated thing for Nico Iamaleava as well. Like I said, if he goes 8-5, 8-9 win team in the Big Ten, 100% could go in this loaded draft class. But also at the same time, if he goes 8-9 wins as well, why doesn't he spend another year in college football? Possibly throw his hat in the ring in a contender. I think that's possible. Now, I also discussed with Nico Iamaleava this year as well. I think, again, he didn't have as big of a market in a transfer portal with, again, his past, but also at the same time, UCLA being disgusting. But this year, if he could, again, up these numbers, show that he could lead a winning team again, I think he'll have a lot more market in the transfer portal. Nico Iamaleava is the one guy on this list that the path isn't necessarily clear. I think it's going to be a much better season for him, and he could put his hat in the ring in the NFL draft, depending on his stock, or he could definitely play for a top 10 team in the country. Then at number 1, it's kind of weird. Again, I'm going off college football. I think when you look at last year with this quarterback, you could definitely say he's the best quarterback on this list. You could definitely say he's a top 10 quarterback in the country without a doubt. And I'm going off of college football. Out of everybody on this list who I would want to lead my team this year, it's 100% Demon Williams. Demon Williams, 69% completion percentage, 3,000 yards, 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Then we look in 2024 limited games. He had an 8-to-1 touchdown interception ratio and a 78% completion percentage, 944 yards. Like we said, obviously that's limited. I feel like out of everybody on this list, he's definitely the biggest threat with his legs. He may be the best dual threat quarterback in the country. Had 611 yards last year. Demon Williams, again, this just shows he could have went to LSU. It didn't happen due to legal issues. He wanted to transfer out. That's my biggest question with Washington. How is that team going to adapt with that? Now, he addressed it. We posted it. He said that they are fine. He had to take his teammates out to dinner, kind of explain everything. But Demon Williams, in my opinion, shows that every transfer quarterback going into their last year. Now, I do think Demon Williams is going to play another year after this year and transfer to a bigger program finally. But every quarterback, at least going into their last year, if they play on a program, even like a program like Washington last year, that was 8-4 in the Big Ten, you gotta eventually transfer to, a top 5, top 10 program in the country. I think Demon Williams is phenomenal. I think he's going to prove yet again. I said it last year. He was one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the country. I'm going to say it this year. One of the most underrated quarterbacks in the country. If he was on LSU, this may be a guy that might be looked at as a top 5 quarterback in the country. The only thing I think Demon Williams has to improve on is maybe getting off that first read, and I think he's going to improve that this year because he's not going to have Denzel Boston, a guy that was a fringe first rounder, end up going in the top of the second round last year, like one of the best receivers in the entire country. He's not going to have that. He's not going to have Jonah Coleman as well, but I think this program really retained everything on that offensive line to make it one of the best offensive lines in the Big Ten, which I think is huge for a guy that relies heavily on the RPO game. Also, I think it's huge for Desmond Roback to come back. You're looking at a guy with over 500 yards as a true freshman, 7 touchdowns. I think he could be a leading receiver for this team. I think replacing Jonah Coleman with Jaden Lamar, I think Jaden Lamar could be one of the best running backs in the country. I think he's going to be a guy that's not really going to split backs. I think split carries. I think he's going to have over 60% of the work. And he's a guy at Oregon, in my opinion, that showed that he's ultra talented, but he just kind of got buried in that depth chart. Obviously, to have 2 of the best running backs in the country at Oregon. But I thought that was a monster underrated ad for him. Like, you're looking at an 8-4 team that retained pretty much almost everything on defense, retained their entire offensive line. You bring in, like I said, a running back that I think is really talented, and a true freshman receiver that I think could take a massive jump this year. Like, again, Desmond Boston was a huge loss for them. But I think this Washington team, based on their schedule, they're going to be right around the same record. Demon Williams is going to get even better in another year of college football. And I think, again, when you look at Demon Williams, like I said, I compare him to a Kyler Murray light. He's 5'11", 190 pounds. But I believe he's that great of a talent. Like, again, he's not going to go number 1 overall like Kyler Murray did. But I think he could definitely be looked at as a third-round, second-round quarterback one day. And I think this is a great situation. Like, I thought it would have been great if he could have definitely spent 2 years at LSU and been the first quarterback in the Lane Kiffin era. But legal issues didn't really supply that. But I think this year with Demon Williams, have another great year in college football in a program that's going to be really good. And then next year, you dip your hat in the ring on a college football national championship contender. That wraps up this episode on 5 quarterbacks that I think could easily be top 10 quarterbacks in the country if they were in situations. Drop down your comments below. Are these quarterbacks massively underrated? Or also, am I wrong? Are these quarterbacks top 10 quarterbacks in the country? That wraps up this episode for Sloppy Saturdays. Like we continuously say, episodes every day in the offseason, getting you guys ready for college football. And like we said, with the content that we are doing, I have a lot of surprises for you guys. This is going to be way different than anything Sloppy Saturdays has done in season in a while. That wraps up this episode of Sloppy Saturdays, and we are